Parker Schnabel had always dreamed of uncovering the kind of treasure that could change history, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay beneath his boots that day. For years, gold had been his life's pursuit, flakes in rivers, nuggets buried in gravel, the endless grind of chasing fortune through soil and stone. But this time, something felt different. As the excavators roared and the ground shook under the bite of steel, Parker froze, his instincts sharpening like a blade. He sensed they were no longer digging through ordinary earth. The soil resisted its strange ways, as if clinging to a secret it had guarded for centuries. Then came the faintest reflection, a shimmer in the dirt that stopped everyone in their tracks. The world around him seemed to slow, the dust spiraling through the air, the heavy thrum of machinery fading into the background, his pulse hammering louder than anything else. He barked an order for the scanners to run another sweep, and when the readings came back, disbelief swept through the crew. What lay beneath them was not an empty void, but a hidden shaft carefully crafted, deliberately concealed, and holding something extraordinary. At first, the sonar hinted at irregular shapes, pockets that didn't belong, outlines of passages long forgotten. The crew whispered about abandoned mines, old tunnels left by men who had come and gone long ago. But as the drills sank deeper, the ground pushed back harder than expected. Layers of compacted soil and stone built almost like armor. Then, with one final bite of machinery, the tunnel gave way and Parker's flashlight beam caught what no one had dared to imagine. This wasn't a natural cave. It was man-made, reinforced with aged timbers and rusted supports, every piece placed with purpose. Strange carvings appeared on the beams and walls, symbols that looked far into the region, as though they had been etched by hands from another world. The air was damp, thick, and carried the weight of years gone by. As they pressed forward, Parker's boots sank into mud and water seeped through cracks in the rock. But none of it mattered. In the glow of their lights, the darkness gave way to a shimmer, a glimmer of gold. At first it was only a flicker, a teasing glint buried in the dirt, but soon coins appeared, stacked in neat piles, half-buried treasures that seemed untouched by time. Nuggets and artifacts surfaced one after another until the chamber before them glittered like a hidden starfield. This was no mere stash of miners' luck. It was a hoard, hidden with care and precision. Every object seemed placed with intent, coins engraved with strange crests, golden relics shaped for ceremony rather than trade, artifacts that whispered of forgotten societies. Some bore crosses, others carried cryptic markings, and the carvings on the walls hinted at stories no history book had ever told. The deeper they dug, the more they realized this place had been designed as much to protect as to preserve. Traps emerged, sandpits ready to swallow the careless, rusted mechanisms waiting to collapse walls. Devices so cunning they seemed alive even after centuries. The shaft itself felt like it was watching them, testing whether they were worthy of its secrets. Yet Parker pressed forward, every step driven by equal parts ambition and caution. He had seen gold before, but never like this. What surrounded them wasn't just wealth, it was legacy. It was knowledge. It was a secret deliberately buried to outlast time. The deeper Parker and his crew ventured into the shaft, the more the discovery revealed its deliberate nature. This was no random accumulation of riches lost to chance. It was a vault engineered with care, each timber beam and stone block aligned to endure centuries. The chamber widened gradually, its walls lined with carvings that seemed almost too sophisticated for the time. They must have been made. Strange lines intersected, symbols overlapped, and certain patterns repeated with a rhythm that felt intentional, as though a coded language had been left behind for those daring enough to uncover it. Parker ran his hand across one of the carvings, tracing grooves that were deeper than casual marks, worn smooth by age, but still sharp in their meaning. He didn't yet understand what they were trying to say, but he could feel the weight of their purpose. Around him, the crew whispered in awe, their voices hushed by the magnitude of the find. They weren't just miners anymore, they had become explorers stepping into a hidden narrative that stretched across time. The chamber itself was breathtaking. Gold glimmered from every corner, coins spilling from decayed chests, artifacts jutting from the soil like relics of an ancient world. Some items were clearly ceremonial, a chalice etched with intricate designs, fragments of what looked like a crown or headdress, tools shaped with care, but far too delicate for practical use. Each piece told a story, though none of them were complete. Mixed among the artifacts were stacks of coins, some stamped with Latin inscriptions, others marked with cryptic emblems that no one could immediately identify. The craftsmanship was beyond question, but their origin remained elusive. It was as if the chamber had been filled not only with treasure, but with puzzles, pieces of a forgotten history deliberately hidden beneath the earth. The crew moved carefully, every shovel and every brush of soil treated with reverence. The usual clamor of mining had given way to an almost sacred silence, broken only by the drip of water and the occasional metallic clink of gold meeting gold. But awe soon gave way to danger. As they dug deeper into the shaft, old defenses sprang back to life. A section of the floor crumbled suddenly, revealing a concealed pit filled with loose sand designed to trap and suffocate anyone unlucky enough to fall in. Rusted levers hidden in the walls triggered small collapses when disturbed, sending showers of stone crashing down just inches from where the crew worked. The realization hit hard. This place had not only been meant to preserve its contents, but also to punish intruders. The treasure had been protected by more than time and soil. It had been shielded by human ingenuity and ruthless cunning. The builders had gone to extraordinary lengths to ensure that only those both determined and cautious could ever reach the hoard. Parker's jaw tightened. He wasn't about to back down. Danger was nothing new to him, and this was the kind of find men dreamed of their entire lives. He pressed forward, guiding his team with precision, balancing boldness with restraint. Each new discovery raised more questions than answers. Who had hidden this fortune? Why had they marked the walls with strange symbols and buried artifacts? That seemed to speak of power and secrecy rather than trade. And perhaps most hauntingly, what else lay beyond these chambers? The sonar scans had already hinted at voids deeper underground, hollows that didn't connect directly to the main shaft. If this single chamber contained such unimaginable wealth, what might be waiting in the others? The thought sent a thrill through Parker, though it was tempered with the knowledge of the risks. The earth groaned around them, the shaft pressing in as though it resented the intrusion. Every sound echoed with menace, every shadow seemed to conceal both promise and peril. Yet with each coin uncovered, each artifact brushed clean, Parker knew the truth. This was only the beginning. As the team cataloged every artifact, Parker's eyes kept drifting to a section of wall that seemed wrong. The stones there didn't align perfectly with the rest, almost as if they had been deliberately arranged to conceal something. The markings above it were different, to patterns that resembled arrows or pathways, symbols that repeated with an unsettling precision. His instincts flared. He ordered the crew to bring tools, and together they worked slowly, stone by stone, prying loose the blocks that had sealed the wall for centuries. Each scrape of metal against rock echoed sharply in the chamber, their breaths shallow, hearts pounding. Finally, the last stone gave way, and a rush of cold, stale air spilled out. It carried with it the unmistakable scent of aged dust untouched for hundreds of years. Behind the wall yawned a narrow passage, its darkness stretching deeper into the earth. The tunnel forced them to move slowly, hunched low, testing each step. The walls pressed close, damp with condensation. The silence broken only by the crunch of boots against loose soil. Every inch carried the risk of collapse, every breath heavy with anticipation. Parker's flashlight beam swept across the cramped space, illuminating strange etchings carved directly into the rock lines, circles, and intersecting symbols that looked more like coded instructions than decoration. Then, just as the air seemed to thicken with unease, a glimmer broke through the black. At first faint, like a distant star, it grew brighter as they pressed forward. When the crew stepped into the hidden chamber, their jaws dropped. Before them was not a scatter of coins or relics, but neat, towering stacks of gold bars, dozens upon dozens of them, arranged in deliberate order as though they had been waiting for this very moment. The sight left the crew speechless. Each bar was solid, heavy, and unmistakably pure. The markings etched into their surfaces suggested careful measurement and refinement, some stamped with emblems, others with unfamiliar characters that no one could immediately decipher. Parker's hand trembled slightly as he touched the nearest bar, its surface cool and smooth beneath the beam of his flashlight. The weight of it was undeniable, both in metal and in meaning. This was wealth beyond comprehension by rough estimate, over $115 million in gold, untouched for centuries. Yet even here, it wasn't only the gold that stunned them. Among the bars were relics, carefully placed sealed clay jars containing manuscripts, chests bound with rusted iron bands, ceremonial objects carved with intricate designs. The chamber wasn't just a vault. It was a time capsule, a deliberate preservation of wealth, history, and knowledge. When the crew pried open one of the sealed jars, they froze. Inside were tightly wound scrolls, fragile yet still legible, filled with lines of writing no one immediately recognized. The script was unlike anything they had ever seen, a mixture of symbols, characters, and diagrams that seemed to blend languages, almost as if it were designed to be understood only by those with the key to unlock it. Parker's chest tightened as he realized the significance. This wasn't simply about gold anymore. Whoever had hidden this treasure wasn't just protecting wealth, they were safeguarding knowledge. Secrets too important to be left on the surface. The carvings on the walls began to make more sense in his mind. They weren't random markings. They were clues, a coded language, perhaps even a map pointing to something greater still buried beneath the earth. The crew stood in silence, the glow of their flashlights bouncing off the gold bars until the entire chamber seemed to shimmer, like a furnace of light. For a long moment, no one dared to move. Even the most seasoned workers, men hardened by years of mining, stared in disbelief, their expressions caught between wonder and fear. Then, as though shaken from a spell, they began to work. Every step was measured, every gesture cautious. The chamber felt alive, as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting to see what these intruders would do. The further they explored, the clearer it became that this was no random stash of wealth. It was arranged with purpose, as though meant to tell a story. The manuscripts inside the clay jars deepened that mystery. Though the scrolls were fragile, the writing on them remained visible symbols that intertwined with scripts resembling Latin, Greek, and languages none of them could recognize. Some pages were filled with diagrams, geometric patterns, constellations, and what looked like maps. Though not of any landscape familiar to the crew, one of the younger miners whispered that it looked more like instructions, a code meant to lead them further. Parker's eyes narrowed as he studied the markings by the beam of his flashlight. The carvings on the chamber walls matched some of the shapes on the scrolls. It was as though the chamber itself had been designed as a key, its walls and contents part of a larger puzzle. But with every discovery came danger. At one point, as the crew shifted a pile of stones near the chamber's far wall, a grinding sound rumbled from above. Dust poured down in choking clouds, and for an instant, it seemed the ceiling would collapse. They scrambled back, hearts pounding, as heavy rocks crashed into the space they had been standing only seconds before. When the dust settled, the message was clear. The builders of this place had planned for intruders, even centuries into the future. Traps weren't accidents of time, they were weapons, waiting patiently to strike. Parker clenched his jaw. He knew that turning back would mean safety, but it would also mean leaving behind the greatest discovery of his career, and perhaps of modern history. As they pressed deeper into the chamber, another anomaly revealed itself. Behind one stack of gold bars, the wall bore carvings unlike the others. Instead of symbols, these resembled constellations, a cluster of stars mapped with precision. When Parker compared them to the diagrams in the manuscripts, his suspicion grew. This chamber wasn't the end, it was a waypoint, a carefully designed step in a much larger labyrinth. The gold was staggering, the manuscripts priceless, but the true secret might still lie ahead. The air hung heavy with tension as he turned to his crew. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling, but none of them spoke of leaving. The promise of more treasure, more knowledge, and more history buried in the earth was stronger than fear. And so, with careful hands and measured breaths, Parker led them to the farthest corner of the chamber toward another wall. That seemed just slightly out of place. The stones there were smaller, tighter, almost as if they were hiding something. The room grew silent as Parker laid his hand against the cold stone, listening. Behind it, the air carried an echo. Another void, another hidden passage. The realization sent a chill through him. What they had uncovered so far, millions in gold, centuries of secrets, might only be the beginning. The decision to break through the second hidden wall did not come lightly. The crew stood in uneasy silence, their flashlights trembling slightly in their hands. They had already seen what the builders of this vault were capable of: ingenious traps, deadly collapses, and defenses that had survived centuries. But Parker's resolve was unshakable. This wasn't just about wealth anymore. It was about unlocking a story that had been buried for generations, maybe even longer. With steady hands, he directed the team to begin dismantling the wall stone by stone. Each block was pried free with a mix of reverence and dread, the scraping of metal against rock echoing like a warning through the chamber. The deeper they worked, the colder the air became, until a gust of stale wind whispered through the widening gap. When the last stone fell away, the beam of Parker's flashlight cut into the void beyond, and the sight that met them was unlike anything they had imagined. The third chamber was vast, far larger than the previous two, its ceiling vanishing into darkness overhead. Stalactites hung like daggers from above, glistening with moisture that dripped steadily into black pools on the ground. The air was thicker here, heavy with the scent of earth and something metallic. And then, as their light swept across the space, the crew froze. At the center of the chamber stood a massive stone platform. and upon it lay an arrangement of gold unlike anything they had ever seen, not in chests, not in stacks, but in intricate geometric shapes, triangles, circles, and spirals of pure gold bars, as though placed with ceremonial precision. It was not storage, it was ritual. Surrounding the platform were objects that sent chills down their spines. Tall, weathered statues lined the walls, carved from the same stone as the chamber itself. Each figure bore a hooded cloak, their features worn away by time, but their posture unmistakable. They were guardians, silent watchers over the treasure. Some of the statues clutched swords, others scrolls, and one in particular held what appeared to be a globe, its surface etched with faint lines that looked eerily similar to maps. Parker realized then that this was no ordinary hoard. This was the heart of something much larger, a vault not just of wealth, but of power, belief, and knowledge. The manuscripts from the second chamber suddenly seemed less cryptic. Parker held one scroll against the carvings on the platform, and the alignment was uncanny. Symbols matched, diagrams overlapped, and the constellations on the page mirrored patterns carved into the ceiling of the chamber itself. This was a code, a deliberate design that suggested the treasure wasn't simply hidden for safekeeping. It had been preserved as part of a legacy, perhaps even a ritual of succession. Was this the work of an ancient brotherhood? A secret order guarding knowledge too dangerous for the world above? Or perhaps the remnants of a forgotten empire that had sought to secure its wisdom in the only place it could never be stolen beneath the earth? As Parker pieced these thoughts together, the chamber itself seemed to resist their intrusion. A low groan rumbled through the walls, dust sifting down from the ceiling. One of the crew shouted in alarm as the ground shifted beneath their feet. It was clear now. Every step deeper carried them closer to collapse, both literal and metaphorical. The builders had not only hidden their wealth, but had woven danger into the very design of the place. Yet as Parker looked at the gold, the manuscripts, and the cryptic carvings that hinted at secrets still unrevealed, he knew retreat was not an option. They had crossed a threshold. What lay ahead was not simply discovery, it was revelation. The silence in the third chamber was deafening. Every man felt it, a weight that pressed on their chests, as though the air itself carried the burden of centuries. The statues loomed at the edges of the light, their hollow eyes seeming to follow each movement. Parker stepped cautiously onto the platform, his boots clinking softly against the gold bars that had been arranged in deliberate patterns. The precision was staggering. This was not a random hoard piled in haste. This was a language written in metal, a code laid out for those who could decipher it. The manuscripts gave the first real clue. As Parker unfurled one fragile scroll, its ink symbols flickered in the beam of his flashlight. The lines formed spirals and grids, overlaid with constellations that mirrored the carvings on the chamber's ceiling. When aligned with the gold's formation, they revealed a startling truth. The arrangement of the bars mapped the heavens. Each stack represented a star, each spiral mirrored a galaxy. The treasure itself was a star map, a cosmic diagram preserved in the most incorruptible medium pure gold. His breath caught as he realized what they were looking at. This wasn't just wealth. It was knowledge, ancient, deliberate, and meant for someone who could read it. The crew murmured nervously, their voices bouncing in uneasy echoes. Some swore the statues had shifted, their shadows growing longer, darker. Others insisted the manuscript spoke of warnings, not instructions. One fragment translated roughly into a chilling phrase: "The earth will guard what Desky once got. The earth will guard what Desky once got." Gave, whether prophecy or protection. The message was clear: what they had found was never meant to be taken lightly. And then came the discovery that shook them all. Hidden within a chest bound in iron, half buried at the base of one of the hooded statues, they found a set of bound parchments unlike the others. These weren't written in code, but in legible Latin, faded yet still decipherable. Parker squinted at the translation. Piecing the words together, it spoke of a brotherhood sworn to protect a legacy carried across oceans, guided by the stars. It hinted at kings, explorers, and secret societies, names scratched out, erased, as if deliberately hidden from history. The manuscripts didn't just tell of treasure. They told of a transfer of power, of a hidden line of knowledge that had survived in whispers, carried across generations. The weight of the revelation was overwhelming. What they had uncovered wasn't just $115 million in gold, it was a vault of history. Knowledge that might rewrite everything the world thought it knew about exploration, civilization, and power. Yet with every word, every symbol, Parker could feel the chamber tighten around them. Stones groaned in protest, and a fine crack split across one of the statues, sending dust spiraling into the air. The builders had not only hidden this secret, they had made sure it would punish anyone who lingered too long. And still, Parker couldn't turn away. Not now. They had already unearthed enough to change history. But the manuscripts hinted at more. Another chamber. A final resting place that contained not just gold, but the ultimate secret. He tightened his grip on the scroll, his eyes meeting those of his crew. Fear, awe, and determination flickered across their faces. None of them spoke, but the truth was written in their silence. They would go deeper. The crew gathered around the Latin parchments, their flashlights casting long, jagged shadows across the statues. Parker's fingers trembled as he traced the faded lines, translating piece by piece. The writing spoke of a sanctum ultimum, the last sanctuary, the final chamber, where the true heart of the legacy lay hidden. The scroll described it as a place guarded not just by stone and earth, but by the weight of heaven itself. The words were ominous, but they carried a promise too. Those who reach it will inherit what was never meant to be lost. The chamber itself seemed to react to their discovery. A distant rumble echoed through the walls, a groan so deep it vibrated in their bones. Dust rained from the ceiling, and one of the gold spirals shifted, sending bars clinking to the ground. At first the crew panicked, thinking the whole cavern might collapse. But then Parker noticed something. The fallen bars revealed a gap and opening in the stone platform, a seam almost invisible until now. With painstaking effort, they cleared the area, prying away layers of rock and gold until the outline of a massive stone slab became visible. Etched into its surface was the same constellation pattern that decorated the manuscripts. This was at the entrance to the final chamber. It took hours of grilling work to free the slab, and when it finally gave way, the ground trembled as though the earth itself resented their intrusion. A hollow passage opened beneath, exhaling a gust of air so cold and ancient it sent shivers crawling down their spines. The tunnel was narrow, sloping downward into darkness, every surface slick with condensation. The men hesitated, glancing at Parker, but he didn't need to speak. His determination alone pulled them forward. Step by cautious step, they descended, leaving the glittering chamber of gold and statues behind. What awaited them was unlike anything they had seen before. The final chamber was not filled with gold or relics, but with something far stranger. At its center stood a massive stone table, carved from a single block of black rock that shimmered faintly in their lights. Spread across it were objects that defied simple explanation: crystal spheres, metallic discs engraved with symbols, and parchment sealed in wax that had somehow survived the centuries intact. The walls were covered in carvings far more intricate than the others, depicting scenes of ships crossing oceans, stars guiding travelers, and cloaked figures raising their hands in solemn ritual. It was a narrative in stone, an epic tale spanning continents, perhaps even civilizations long erased from history. But the object that drew Parker's breath short was a chest at the far end of the chamber, elevated on a pedestal of stone. Unlike the others, this chest was not decayed or broken. It gleamed faintly, bound in metal and covered in sigils that matched the manuscripts. The crew approached slowly, their nerves stretched thin. Parker laid a hand on its cold surface, his heart pounding. The manuscripts had called this chamber the heart of the legacy, the sanctum where the most sacred truth had been preserved. With steady hands, he broke the ancient seal. Inside lay not treasure in the traditional sense, but documents, maps, and relics of such staggering significance that Parker felt the weight of history pressing down on him. There were maps showing coastlines centuries before they were ever charted, diagrams of machines that seemed far too advanced for the time, and genealogical records that hinted at bloodlines tied to kings, explorers, and secret societies across the globe. The crew stood in stunned silence, realizing that they weren't holding just wealth, they were holding knowledge that could rewrite the very history of mankind. And then came the most chilling discovery. At the very bottom of the chest was a single slab of metal, etched with words in multiple languages. Some they recognized: Latin, Greek, even fragments of Old English, but others were indecipherable. The message, once pieced together, was haunting. This is not the end. What you seek is still deeper, where light has never reached. Beware, for the earth keeps its secrets jealously. The chamber seemed to groan in agreement, the ground shaking beneath their feet. For a moment, Parker wondered if the message was a warning or a challenge.